Welcome to episode 62 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum.
And myself, Jane Bond.
How are we today, Jane?
Oh, fine. Still a bit croaky, but not too bad. Sun's shining, kind of.
And we're finally throwing the dodgy laptop away, aren't we?
Oh, I tell you, I was ready to throw it through the window yesterday. It's been mended so many times, and then it just died yesterday again. So now, hopefully, you'll be able to hear me.
Yeah, hopefully they'll replace it eventually without the amount of work they've gone to try and repair it is incredible, actually, which is probably good in a way, but if it still doesn't work right after the repair, then it doesn't help us. Anyway, this week we have Simon Little, who is director of Powerday, who are a construction waste company in London. So quite good timing because I'd just been down in London. I was a bit fascinated by all the construction projects in London and the access and getting supplies in and getting waste out of sites and so on. So it was great to talk to Simon, but more about Simon later. First of all, news, Jane, vapes.
Yes,
I
yes.
think.
I know we always like to be on our hobby horse about vapes, but we've got, well, it looks like good news. There's a BBC report which basically says disposable vape use is falling in the UK ahead of the ban, which is really good because the ban on their sale is on the 1st of June. And it's saying that it's dropped. The percentage of people aged 16 to 24 who mainly use disposable vapes has dropped by nearly a half in the last year, from 63% to 35%, according to researchers, which, is pretty significant. I mean, what they're using instead, I'm not quite sure. Alistair, is that something you've had a look at?
Well, I think I saw that report, and then I also saw a report from Scott Butler, who is the executive director at Material Focus. And we interviewed Scott on episode 15, and he's been very, very good at pushing out information in terms of number of vapes, disposable vapes used, and so on. And his big post was, it's not really as good news as we're making out, because all that's happening is it's been replaced by what they call big puff vapes that have got ability to be recharged and can have some replacement liquid. But at the end of the day, the people putting them onto the market are still not providing a take back for vapes. So there's still a challenge with huge numbers going on the market and them still not doing the take back, which they're legally required to do at the moment. Good news and bad news, but it's just a bit of a fudge, I think.
Well, yeah, it's just coming back under a different name, isn't it?
I did spot a social media post, I think on LinkedIn, about some poor young person who died from overuse of vapes. And they
Really?
showed a picture of his lungs, and honestly, it looks worse than
Oh,
like smokers' lungs. The photos you see in the cigarette packets of smokers' lungs, it just looked horrific. So if anybody thinks that vaping is a better alternative to smoking, I would suggest to take a look at some of the health stats in vapes, because we worry about the environmental side of it, but the health impact of vapes is horrific.
yeah, no, that does sound awful. That does sound awful. So I was also looking at whether I saw another article and I was thinking, is this the new vapes? Is this what we're going to target next? And it's to do with electric toothbrushes. And it was saying that more than 34 million users in the UK of electric toothbrushes and more globally, and a contribution to e-waste. The UK alone disposes of around 2,266 tonnes of toothbrushes, which is just like, you start thinking about the volume. And I was looking at the different types of electric toothbrushes, because we've got the ones that you can just, the non-rechargeable ones, you buy them and then you can use them, and you're thinking, right, okay, I know it's got a battery in it, but you put it in your bathroom bin because that's the easiest place to put it. And then there is the,
No, you don't. You
really?
don't. You replace your battery and you take your batteries to the shop, Jane. That's what I do.
Not with those ones that are just all closed up and you can't open them. Um,
No, I'd agree. The ones that aren't closed up, I'd agree with that.
yeah, the sort of non-rechargeable ones. Yes, sorry, the rechargeable ones that you can recharge or you can take batteries out or whatever. Yeah, fair enough. There's no real excuse for chucking those in the bin, because they're obviously I don't know. Perhaps it's perception of what's it's like with the vapes. You buy them. They don't cost that much. You use them for, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks, or whatever. Chuck them in the bin, and you don't actually think about it.
Yeah, I know my electric toothbrush is a battery one with, okay, replaceable batteries rather than rechargeable batteries. But I've had that toothbrush for years now. Years and years. And if you look after them, they do last a long time. But I suppose it's back to this. The people putting the toothbrushes in the market should be making it clearer that they're under a legal obligation to take them back and recycle them.
Yeah, because those are just sold as,
really, isn't it?
because those are just sold with the normal toothbrushes. Whereas, you've got your rechargeable, they're in a nice box and they cost about 20 odd quid, 30 quid or whatever, whereas those cost £5. Anyway, so yes, so is that going to be the new vapes? Oh, the fire is actually caused by electric toothbrushes instead of vapes now.
There you go. 2,266 tons of toothbrushes is quite a lot of toothbrushes.
It is a lot. And it says it's 212 million electric toothbrush heads and manual brushes. That's 212 million. That's a lot of toothbrushes.
Yeah, but would have used that amount of toothbrushes as well. So it's not, people aren't using an electric toothbrush and a toothbrush. So
yes,
I'm sure if you went back and looked at how many toothbrushes. So yeah.
Yes, I suppose so. But then you've still got that composite stuff, haven't you? You've still got the batteries, and you've got the plastic around it, and the little heady bit. Yeah. So I suppose, yes, you're not using as many plasticky toothbrushes, but you've still got that battery element, which is more hazardous than just a normal toothbrush.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The other one we've got is Tolvik. Tolvik have done a report on UK incineration. So Tolvik do an annual report on the waste stats for 2024, and they have been doing for a number of years. Interesting, across the UK, something like 19.21 million tonnes of waste capacity for incineration, but we'll only actually use 16.82 million tonnes of that actual capacity. So we're, there's quite a discrepancy over a million tonnes there. Net calorific value they're saying is about 9.62, but there is a lot of detail in the report about how the data's maybe not quite right. So I think potentially leading to some interesting discussions with the carbon trading scheme and how they work out, calorific value of waste. What else was there in there? They're operating for 87.4% of the time on average. So don't take your permitted capacity in the UK and assume that's what you can burn, because that's not what's going to happen, because they're not going to be working all the time. And then they do have a really interesting map on page 12 of the report, and it's pretty clear when you look at the map. There's a huge area of the countries with just next to no capacity for incineration. It's like, huge part of north of Scotland, from south of Scotland away down to Birmingham almost, there's no capacity, apart from across the east in Newcastle. Most of Wales has got next to no capacity. So it's actually quite interesting how there are big chunks of the country still with no capacity. So as always, there's lots of detail in that report, and we'll share it on the newsletter if anybody's interested, wanting to get into the depth of it. There's lots of stuff about carbon metrics and so on. So yeah, lots of detail there if anybody wants to read it.
Is that incineration capacity that, as in there's an incinerators there, but there's no capacity available, or is that there's just no incinerators there, or energy from waste facilities there?
There's just on the map you can see they put a dot where every incinerator is, and you can just see in the map that there's just areas where there's just no incinerators.
There's nothing. Yeah.
The other one I meant to mention, there are 13 by the end of 2024. There were 13 plants under construction, and that totaled almost 5 million tonnes per annum of capacity. And interestingly, 4 of these are actually in Scotland. But I know for a fact one of them, the construction's actually halted, so it's not going to happen, or it's not happening anytime soon. but no, if you're looking for data on it, good report from Tolvik, and they track it based on previous years as well, so you can see the trends and so on. If anybody's interested.
Good. And I think this is a positive one, because there's a Paisley business has been caught fly tipping. He wasn't paying for his waste disposal, obviously, and decided that I'm not going to pay, so I'm going to take my bags and I'm going to dump them at Spearsbridge Business Park. And according to this, it was cardboard, plastic bread crates, black bin bags, and packaging. And 7 times in 2 months, there was information that he was tipping it. So there was an investigation with East Renfrewshire Council and SEPA, and he was caught and he was sentenced. Well, he was fined. So that's I think that's quite a positive thing that we're actually getting, actually catching some of these illegal fly tippers.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good because it often with councils and SEPA, fly tipping often falls between two stools as to who does the enforcement. So it's good to see East Renfrewshire Council and SEPA working together on that one.
Yeah, no, it was
and
good.
then the last one I had, which amused me slightly but made me a bit depressed, was a BBC report saying a search and rescue operation involved a Coast Guard helicopter, RNLI lifeboat, ended once they found the emergency beacon, which had set itself off, and the beacon was actually in a recycling centre.
Yes, going through the
up.
conveyor belt.
Yep, so it was in the J&B recycling plant, and it was going up the conveyor belt, but the poor helicopter and the lifeboat crew were looking for it, which I think that it is a bit amusing, but it's also a bit scary that they never had a better location for these beacons, because I use one of these beacons when I go running in the hills in case I have an accident, and you would like to think it would know pretty close to where you are, but I think it's partly because it's been set off obviously when it's in the building, so then it's not had a proper connection with the satellite, which means the signal wouldn't have been that good. So yeah, I'm actually surprised it's not happened before, to be honest.
Yeah. Yes. So how are we doing? Any rubbish talk news, Alistair?
Not the only thing I've spotted. Well, a couple of things. One thing I've spotted when I look at our stats, we seem to have an increase in listenership in America for some reason. Maybe they're just bored silly with all the Trump nonsense that's going on. They're maybe just looking for some sanity. Whether they're getting sanity here or not is different. And I have committed adultery again. I recorded
Shocking.
a podcast a week or so ago. I don't actually know when it goes out, but I'll find out. And maybe for this newsletter it might go out that, or maybe we go out the next time. So, yeah, I've done that. And usual shout out and share to people. We got good feedback about the Alec Coleman episode we did from Soilex. People seem to really like that one, and if you've not listened to that one, I would suggest giving it a wee listen. And then the other one we did recently was Bryce. So if you want to find out a fact about cows that we certainly didn't know, and you've not listened to it, then I think you need to listen in.
I was just going to say, we were talking yesterday about Spotify and following on Spotify. Mm-hmm. And I had my Spotify out and we were looking at it and I'm like, where is the follow button? So when you open up your Spotify, if you go to the very top, it actually says follow. Just press that button and then we know that you're following us. And that would be very good, because we like to know that people are following us and are interested in what we have to say, because there's lots of information in these podcasts and on all the newsletters and everything that Mia sends out. So follow us, like us, get in touch. hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.
I'll actually need to check that. I've followed it, Jane.
Well, I thought I was being stupid
I'm not
yesterday, but you know,
try to find a button.
Yeah,
I think this is, for the listeners out there, this is one of the challenges we've got. We put it out on Spotify, but it also goes out on lots of other platforms, and it's actually really difficult to work out, where it all goes and where where people pick it up from. So if you do listen on different platforms, just please, if you can find a follow button, then give us a wee follow.
Yes.
As I said at the start, Simon Little, who is the director at Powerday, and it was quite opportune because I'd been down in London recently, as I said, and Simon Little and Powerday are the big commercial waste contractor in and around London. So it was really fascinating talking to him about just some of the challenges of working, doing waste management in a big city where, traffic's a problem, access is a problem, and so on. So over to myself, Jane, and Simon.
Hi, Simon. Welcome to Rubbish Talk. How are you today?
Hi Jane. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. I don't know why I'm feeling a little bit nervous, which is it's not really like me, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Don't
Looking
be
forward to it.
nervous. Don't be nervous. It's all about you. We've got all these questions. There's no wrong answers. This is the thing. There's no wrong answers in this
Well,
one. So, to start off with,
yeah,
can you
that
just
remains to be seen.
to start off with, can you tell us who you currently work for and a bit of background about the organisation that you work for, and we can get a bit of a starter for
Yeah,
10.
sure. Well, as my not so subtle branding behind me suggests, I work for a company called Powerday. I guess a lot of people listening to this will know a bit about us. Some will know quite a bit. We specialise in construction waste, and particularly in London, sorting out mixed construction waste. And we've built the plants and quite a reputation and doing that rather well. We take in mixed waste from all over London. We've got 8 sites now. Where I'm based here at our main site in Willesden, it's a huge site with a lot of processing capability. We've got another one, a smaller version but similar in Brimsdown, which is northeast London, and plans for a couple more. But as I say, we operate 8 sites. We cover the whole of Greater London and a little bit out into the surrounding counties as well. A lot of sorting materials, a lot of recycling, and residual wastes going domestically and internationally.
So, how much
So
waste do you manage? What kind of different types are you separating it into? Is it just mainly C&D waste?
Yeah, that's our bread and butter. I mean, we started in the construction industry in the 70s. Actually, the business was founded by our current owner's father as a construction business, labour services, and I think back in the day they had sort of around 3,000 guys working in and around London. I suppose I should say that it was as guys and girls, but there wasn't too many lady labourers back in those days. Um, so about 3,000 fellas working on sites, and that kind of naturally morphed into plant hire. Plant hire became skip hire. Skip hire became trucks. It became yards, and then 2008, 9, this site was built out into the huge facility that it is, and that was really and probably on this chat we'll talk a bit about more about landfill tax, the impacts of landfill tax. We've just had a huge hike in landfill tax, but wind the clock back to when landfill tax was introduced, that saw a big wave of construction of recycling plants. I won't say like ours. I don't believe there's anything like ours, but similar to ours at that time. And the whole idea was, well, instead of just bulking up everything and firing it off to landfill, having taken a little bit of metal and maybe a little bit of wood and inert material out, the drive was all about minimising the waste that could go to landfill and therefore be exposed to the tax. And
Do
again,
you,
back in
yeah.
those days, we had escalators of £4 a tonne and then £8 a tonne, and this drove a massive change, and that drove the change in this business.
So, do you see is still a lot of just bulk construction waste coming from the sites, or do you see that they're trying to segregate materials, or what's been your experience in that over the last few years?
Um, there's two sides to the answer, Jane. Where we've worked with house builders outside of London, there's a drive for on-site segregation. There's a real diligence and discipline in doing that. And by and large, the sites and the companies do it very, very well indeed. But traditionally, house builders out of London have space. And of course, they'll phase the development and they'll plan for having a waste compound where you can have multiple bins and, a bin for this, bin for that, inert bricks, blocks, cardboard, metal, wood, piles of inert for crushing and so on. And that's all fantastic. In London, the picture is very different because, of course, the nature of the sites is different. Quite often, the site boundary is actually the boundary of the building, and the buildings are going up higher and higher and higher and higher. So that means that the opportunity for site segregation is very much different and very much lower. So that's where we step in, and we can take that mixed container and effectively separate it on our sites where our clients can't do that on theirs. So we can still deliver really, really high levels of recycling.
So
And that's our thing.
Yeah. So what's your product? What are you actually producing? So you're taking all this stuff in. What are you actually producing in at the end of the day? Is it a product or is it for more recycling?
We produce a number of things. So from our normal construction activities, we'll be producing soils, stones, hardcore, wood, which we then further process. We chip it, we screen it, so we produce a good quality wood chip, which we then supply into chipboard manufacture and biomass. We produce metals. Our clients put anything from a nail to a piece of Harris fencing and constructional steel into the mixed bins, and it's our job to separate out everything between those things. Between a nail and a piece of constructional steel, we'll get everything out with all the magnets that we've got. Plastics, of course, rigid plastics we extract, we grade, we break up, we bale, and then we market those. Glass, we'll touch on some circular initiatives probably a bit later in the chat, but we recover glass to send back to a glass manufacturer. We recover Corex product, so that kind of corrugated cardboard but plastic, which constructors use to protect finished product. So if they're building a residential unit and that unit's finished and they want to make sure it's clean and tidy, dust free, doesn't get a bump or a chip in the paint, covering it with this plastic. And of course, when it's ready to be released to their customers, this plastic comes out. Well, we have a tie-up with a company called Protec. That product goes straight back to Protec. They granulate it, they clean it and reintroduce it with their virgin product to go again and make the same thing. So there's a variety of different products. And then once we've done all of that, of course, we are left, as everybody would be, with a residual material, a refuse-derived fuel, an RDF, which we then market and have done for years, I would say pretty much around the world, but certainly throughout Europe, Scandinavia, and then latterly domestically. So our offer is we'll recycle everything that we can, everything that's recyclable, and I'd sort of couch that by saying economically recyclable.
Yeah.
And then with everything that's left, we turn that into a fuel and we send that to an energy from waste plant. And that's really the core of our offer.
There's quite a lot going on there then.
Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah, quite a bit. We handle round and about 500,000 tonnes of waste a year. No doubt our owner would say, well, we should be doing much, much more than that. But I know our skip business is pretty much always flat out. We have a very strong third party tipping customer base as well. So other companies that collect waste in and around London that need a destination, they come to us, and that's certainly an area of large growth that we see for the business, as well as continuing on our skip work, and we do a pretty good job with that.
I was going to ask Simon about the logistics. I very recently spent the weekend down in London.
Yeah.
Which is actually quite rare for me, but I stayed near London Bridge and they're building a huge new building there.
Yeah.
And I was watching the Arctic turn up with supplies and I was like, how on earth are they going to get that Arctic unloaded? And I saw them open the gate and I saw they were literally slipping the Arctic down the side of the building. Yeah. And then I looked at the crane and the overhead crane wasn't even welded to the ground. It was fixed to the side of the building because they had that limited space. And it was just like, the logistics in some of these projects must just be incredible in terms of access times. And is that not a real
Yeah,
factor in the business? Just that.
it's huge. I mean, I'm not a transport expert, and probably those people watching that are will probably cringe at what I'm about to say. But first of all, running vehicles in London is a really tough thing to do
Yeah.
because there's no certainties. The only thing that's certain is the uncertainty of moving around in London,
Yeah.
and that could be anything from road closure, planned roadworks. It could be unplanned roadworks. It can be broken water mains. It can be anything, which then causes enormous traffic problems. And then if you're delivering to a construction site regularly, you only need one or two of these incidents to roll up and really affect your ability to get into a site. And if you've got to go there multiple times, that's really challenging. You also then overlay that with, as you suggest, for the sites themselves, managing the deliveries is very, very difficult. So in recent, well, relatively recent years, most will operate a booking system now to manage the deliveries in for all the right reasons. The challenge is, of course, that when you're moving anything around London, even if you're driving, if you're driving an Uber or a taxi, it's very, very, very challenging to hit a window of a delivery slot. And of
Yeah, I can
course, if you miss a
imagine.
delivery slot and then you're sent away to rebook, your vehicle could be, out of action for hours. So the challenges working in London are numerous. And that's before you think about ULEZ, you think about, restricted movement times, 20 mile an hour speed limits, the requirements based for, we're a Fours Gold operator here at Powerday, and so there's a whole bunch of requirements around that. We're
So what's
members
that?
of,
I've not heard of that, Simon. What's
it's
that?
it's a scheme called the Fleet Operators Recognition Scheme. So it's basically it's a standard, it's a quality assurance for our customers. Some will specify certain threshold, whether that be bronze, silver, gold. We happen to be a gold accredited member. So it's not an easy thing to do to operate in London. The blessing, however, of course, is that the density of build and therefore the kind of journeys to each individual job for us are actually quite short. Whereas if you're operating a company like ours, let's say in Cambridgeshire, you might have skip vehicles doing 50, 20, 25 miles
Yeah.
to get to a site and then return or onto another one. We're probably 4 or 5 Ks. So, for challenges, there are benefits.
Are you trying to do anything in terms of electric vehicles, electric collection vehicles, that type of stuff? Any plans
That
there?
almost sounds like a loaded question in our favour, that Alistair. If you might have
Well,
looked at, if you've not looked at the website,
I've
well,
not actually.
oh, okay, yeah, we are, and I guess this sort of drops into the overall sustainability piece. So I'll answer the question in a tick, but I remember when I first joined Powerday, it was a very long time ago now, back in 2008-9. I know, and I started off in with WRG. Latterly, they became FCC. Almost 20 years ago now. I think it was the June of 2005. So nearly 20 years in. But back then, the whole drive was zero waste to landfill. And one of our great clients, the Waits Group, I remember they did a visit really early on, and they had a program called Target Zero, and that was all about diversion from landfill, and that was the emphasis then. Now, of course, it's all about carbon reduction, net zero. And amongst a whole bunch of things that we get up to, of course, taking the carbon out of our transport fleet is a big old topic. So, in answer to your question, yes, we do have a couple of electric skip lorries. Needless to say, they weren't cheap. There is a premium to pay for them, but it's part of an overall mission. We only have two at present, and I believe that we will do more. But as another sort of step on that journey, we've converted all of the trucks that we operate from Old Oak Sidings, our base, which is where I'm at, and our second processing plant, Enfield. They've all been converted to HVO, which is the biodiesel, and that takes out, so my sustainability colleagues tell me, about 90 to 92% of the carbon. So that's a big step. Again, there's a premium to pay, but we feel it's a price worth paying. So yeah, I think there'll be more electric. Whether or not electric, as far as HGVs are concerned, will be overtaken by hydrogen, I'm sure your transport experts and viewers will know far more about that than me. But it's all part of the same journey, as far as I can tell.
I think for waste
Yeah.
companies, it's just building up the trust in the vehicles, isn't it? It's
Well,
just
do you know,
building up that trust that
it,
they can
it's a good
they
point.
do
Do you
the
know
job.
what when we first ran the electric vehicles, sort of with through clenched teeth, I asked the two lads, one of the guys that drives, one of them here, one of our drivers called Vinny. He's been with us a long time, and drivers aren't normally the boys that embrace change maybe the quickest. But he loved it. He loved it.
Right,
And what was
right.
surprising, and I mentioned earlier about our journey times, I remember it was only a couple of days into when we'd first got the first one, that the truck had done a full day's work and still had over 50% of the charge left on it. And
Right.
that was a real surprise. The drivability is good, the lifting capability is adequate. Um, the guys like the drive of them. So there was there's certainly no barriers from a driver's perspective um, on them. So really it will boil down to charging capability. Well, here we've got charging points and all the rest of it, and we generate electricity here with two huge solar schemes on both of our big buildings. But out and about, that might be a wee bit more challenging. So it will be about cost of vehicle and ability to charge for more of remote trucks. And if that's sort of nailed and, dare I say, incentivized, and of course, with the world going into, let's say, a little bit of a state of uncertainty again with tariffs and all the rest of it, it looks like the government is going to put a bit of muscle behind EVs and transport generally. Who knows? It may be that electric does become the dominant force in clean transport.
I think the trouble with it is, though, is range, isn't it? Because I know, in a car, relatively light, you've got quite a wide range. Whereas if you're in London, and if you're in London, if it's relatively close. But I know from just
Yeah,
recently, we've got a partner works for Scottish Canals, and he's got a van which is an electric van, big van, does
mm,
140 miles on one charge, which is fine if you're doing local. But if you're heading up to Inverness, it's going to take you 2 days to get there, because even the charging,
yeah,
with the chargers, plugged it into a charger, 2 hours it took, it went up 15%. And you're like,
yeah,
we're never going to
yeah.
get there.
It's
So there's still, and especially with the trucks you've got, it's the weight of them as well, isn't it? But again, if you're local, sorted.
Yeah, but I think, do you know what, Jane? It's one of those where, in a sense, you kind of, or certainly I do, you trust the innovation and the engineers and the scientists that are on this topic. It's such an enormous topic.
It's
There
getting
must be
better.
a,
It's getting better and better,
it's
isn't
getting
it? It's
better. I
getting, yeah.
mean, the first electric car I had, it had a range of about 230 miles. I've just changed. The next one's got about 340
Yeah.
miles range.
Yeah.
Again, we have
Yeah.
chargers here. I can plug into a trickle charge at home overnight on a low tariff. Um, I wouldn't recommend stopping at a motorway service station to recharge, because that's quite a sobering experience. And that's if you
That was
can.
your wallet.
Oh, crikey. Yeah, yeah. But again, that will change in time. Remember
Yeah.
when these great big flat screen TVs came in? You had to part with 3,000 quid for one, and now you can get a nice one for £300 or £400. So everything evolves and everything changes, and it changes really, really quickly. So I think when it comes to the evolution of green transport, green haulage, I think once respective governments get their minds around what is actually required and the target dates come into sharper focus, then you'll see the incentives. And as I say,
Yeah.
maybe naively, I trust the engineers and scientists to deliver the tech. Our job as a relatively small company in the wider scheme of things, of course, is we need to make sure that we've got the appropriate expertise and experience to make those correct shouts for the business, for the to
Absolutely.
make sure that we're competitive.
Bringing you back to your career, Simon, how did you get into the waste management industry, and was it planned?
Well, on your notes that you kindly sent me, you sort of suggested, are you one of the guys that just sort of falls into it like most others? And
Yep.
I was a little bit like that. Yeah, I was a little bit like that. But whilst I might have fell into the opportunity, getting the position wasn't straightforward at all. And I was pretty lucky actually. I finished work. I used to work for a water company, and it was sold. And at the same time, I thought I wouldn't be retained by the new bigger entity. As it transpires, I was retained by them, redeveloping our house that we still live in today. And so I took the opportunity to have a couple of months at home, um, to finish the build, and then looked for work. And it was an advert in the Daily Telegraph. WRG wanted a salesperson to come in. Unbeknownst to me, it was on the cusp of a fairly big pricing project that they wanted done back in those days. Again, all around landfill tax, new ownership. The WRG group had sort of been put together, Shanks acquisition, and there was a whole job of work to be done at landfill. And
So what sort of time period was that when? Was that sort of
that was 2005.
right? Okay.
So
Okay.
this was again when WRG, I think they'd acquired the assets of the Shanks landfill business
Yep. Yep.
at the time, and they wanted to kind of have a very much a regional, north and south, very consolidated, consistent approach to how they priced that landfill void, and they wanted kind of a fresh, well, relatively fresh-faced new boy to go and deliver
So
that project.
was that the period? Was it somebody Hands that was behind that?
That was latterly. Guy Hands was the guy at or is the guy at Terra Firma.
that sort of split the company, didn't
They
they? Basically took the landfill and split the power side out, and
he did. They retained for a time the landfill gas generation business, and sold the landfill business. But that came afterwards, when it was sold again to FCC. But going back to those days, so answering your question, yeah, responded to the advert, had numerous interviews, tests, and all the rest of it. Thankfully, not maths tests or IT tests, and managed to get the job. And I was very, very lucky that the guy that then became my boss, a guy called Malcolm Robinson, who was the regional director, gave me a chance. He was a great boss, and we had a cracking team. There was some good lads there in those days. A chap that helped me immensely, who was doing the job in the north, a guy called Tom Diggle, was a fantastic mentor. Other guys like Chris Ellis, he's still there. He's the divisional director now. Paul Greenwell's at Suez. Paul Rowland's just retired from Viridor.
I know that name.
Yeah, really, really good. Really good guys, a cracking team. So I suppose I was lucky as a new person coming into that environment, with a really strong group of people. And of course, Jim Meredith was the I think he was the CEO, chief executive officer, or chairman, whatever the big man's
Well,
title.
he was involved when I was Shanks way back.
Ah,
He
really?
was at
Right.
Shanks,
Yeah. Well, that's how it happened. So that was great. And from there, I was lucky enough to have Powerday as a client amongst others. And I then met my current boss, Mick Crossan, back in the day, who was a customer. Very difficult customer, I'm sure he won't mind me saying so. And and a few years after that, he asked me to come along and join. And it's
You've been there ever
it's been a good
since.
sector. So I sort of going back to the question, I kind of fell into it, but it was pretty rigorous at the time. But I would certainly say to people coming into this kind of space, it's a great sector. Lots of really good people working hard to do the right job by their clients. It's varied, it's interesting. There's lots of great things to do. Spoken to lots and lots of really interesting people over the years. So yeah, it's a good sector to be in for sure.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it.
So any favourite projects in your journey? Any you look back fondly and think, oh, I would love to be doing that?
Yeah, there's been one or two. I mean, going back to those early days, that the exercise that we had to do at WRG, it was a project that, it was kind of instigated at the very top of the ownership of the company. It needed to be done at that time. Did we do it perfectly? No, we didn't. There were things that you definitely change, but at the time, we felt that we were doing the right thing commercially for the business. So that was pretty good. I had the opportunity to go over to Oman for a week with Powerday back in the day, and we were, believe it or not, we were talking to one of the royal princes in his palace about evolving waste management and strategy. That was really, really exciting, really interesting. We've had groups of people here to our plant from all over the world, Australia, Malaysia, you name it. That's been really good fun as well. So, lots of good stuff. Lots of good stuff over the years for sure.
Any bad things, any disasters, or any funny stories you'd like to share with us, Simon? I'm sure there must be some funny stories based on.
I don't think there's too much bad stuff. Again, you sort of live and learn along the way, don't you? There's certain things, certainly when you get older, you think, well, I might have done that a little bit differently, or I might have handled that a little bit differently. But no, I wouldn't say any massive disasters. I suppose one of the things that was it felt funny to me. It probably wasn't funny. We've dealt here at Powerday with an RDF shipper called Geminor, who you may or may not be familiar with.
Yep.
They're big, and they do a lot both in UK, around Scandinavia and Europe, and we've dealt with them for a number of years. Their country manager now, and he was our account manager then, Oliver. I remember going to an event one day, and I can't remember if we had concluded a negotiation or we were mid-negotiation. And maybe after one or two refreshments too many, I remember picking up a bollard that was in the street and announcing to passers-by that this is my friend from Geminor, and they're far too expensive. Don't deal with this guy, because he's just going to cost you too much money. Now, I thought that was really funny. I'm not sure Oliver did at the time, but we still have a chuckle about that today. So that was quite amusing. But many, many happy times at the sport. Sport is huge here at Powerday, both from a social perspective and also kind of a vehicle for work that our foundation does. So we're massively involved in sport. So we've had many, many happy time socialising down at Twickenham, with our colleagues, friends, stakeholders, clients, with a bit of refreshment and some food and watching a game. So yeah, a lot of that. And of course, when you take into account your whole work life, you can't complain too much about that. We've been very fortunate.
Brilliant. So how do you find, you've obviously been involved in the waste sector for quite a while, how does it affect your day-to-day life in terms of how you look at waste in the big bad world out there, and how you deal with your family and friends?
I suppose this is part of the interest in the overall sector, that I don't think you really need to be an evangelist about it these days, because people are interested in what we're doing. So rather than sort of standing on a soapbox and saying you must do this and you must do that, actually the people you talk to are interested in the topic. They want to know what, RDF is. They want to know what's happening in plastics, and, why do we have plastics at all? Why are we still using this stuff? In a sense, plastic is the new landfill, isn't it? Landfill, bad. Plastic, bad. How are we going to avoid it? So I don't think I need to be an evangelist. I must say, at home, I don't need to be in the recycling sector to understand that you shouldn't be throwing away food. And people that know me can tell by the looking at me, I don't waste any food. So that's a big one. I'm lucky enough to have a garden, so I love being in the garden. I grow vegetables, I compost waste. I certainly, I remember having one fairly heated argument with my missus one day about her buying. There was some asparagus turned up. I think it must have been early on in the year. And thinking, that's a bit weird. It's not the asparagus season. And then saw on the packet it had come from Peru, and it just touched a nerve with me. Don't be buying Peruvian asparagus again. We have it when it's in season, and it'll be English British asparagus. So no, I don't need to be in the sector to understand that sort of stuff. So and I think probably most of us would say the same thing.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of the reason we're doing this podcast is I think we need to share more information about the sector and just the complexity of it. And I
Crikey!
think that's the bit I think we're failing to do really as a sector. We're not doing this explanation to the public.
I totally agree, and unfortunately, people form opinion based on perception, or
Yes.
worse still, almost sort of mischievous misinformation.
Yep.
And we've experienced that ourselves here, and that's a really difficult thing if you've got a kind of audience open to negatively contrived story, to then fight back with the actual positive, or dare I say factual side of that story, and have that permeate into the consciousness. That's a really challenging thing to do. Very, very difficult indeed. And, one of the things that I thought you'd probably be asking me about was, what do you want to see change? And what you'd love to see change is people dealing with reality, not perception. That's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Because, the truth of the matter is all of us involved in the waste management sector, first and foremost, we are dealing with what people discard, or, without thinking.
Yep.
If in the general waste there's a tin can, well, we've got to find it, we've got to recover it, we've got to recycle it, but it should have gone into the curbside recycling in the first place.
Yep.
We are dealing with what others don't think about, both to recycle and dispose of with the best environmental outcome. First and foremost, and I've been on a few seminars now where, again, it's my perception, but I think Suez, as we all know, one of the big guys, they quite often remind the audience that first and foremost we are a sanitary service, and I think it's right to remember that. And I'm sure the residents of Birmingham at the moment that will be forefront of their mind. They want that material moved, and whilst they probably don't want it going to landfill, they certainly don't want it on the street outside their house. So first and foremost, we're sanitary, we're clearing up the mess, and then what we've got to do is, as an industry, we have got to evolve the right technology, sort out the right supply chains to get the best outcomes for that material, for those producers of that waste, and then deliver it at a price point that they can afford.
Yeah.
And as we move forward, that's going to become a greater and greater challenge.
Absolutely. So all that hard work, Simon, how do you get away? How do you relax and get away from work? You mentioned the rugby, you mentioned the gardening. Anything else?
Oh no, I'm very, very shallow.
So that's plenty, I would suggest.
Yeah, very shallow. The rugby's been a huge part of my life for a long, long time. Both as a really bang average player. Then when my son was just about old enough to catch a ball, he started playing, I started coaching, and then I coached through my local club, minis, juniors, and then the seniors, which I've finished now. Yes, I love being in the garden. I travel with my wife. We've been together a very, very, very long time. So now the children are a bit older, we get the chance to disappear again ourselves. Live music, really enjoy live music. So yeah, that's where it's at. Bit of sport, bit of garden, bit of music,
bit of travelling, bit of holidays.
That was the reason I was down in London to go and see ABBA Voyage with my young daughter.
Most lads would say with my young daughter, just as a sense to kind of not justify it, but just put some context in it. And I'm sure you loved it.
I sat there and thought, that is real people on that stage.
Amazing.
It is just incredible how the screens and the filming and stuff, how on earth they do it, I do not know. It was just so realistic. It was incredible.
Well, it needs to be good because, as I understand it, each ticket you could probably, pay a human being for quite some time with the cost of a ticket.
You could get a few days' wages.
Yeah.
Right.
I know it's water off a duck's back. You Scottish lads don't mind spending the money. That's how it works, isn't it? You don't mind doing it.
So what about your
But
current role,
no, no,
Simon?
no.
What are you trying to achieve there? What's next for you? Where are you, where do you see yourself staying with Powerday,
Okay.
developing that side of it?
Yeah, I do. I suspect there's, oh, what is there? Three routes for me after this. One would be being fired. One would be retiring. And the other one would be me expiring here, I suppose, once you get a little bit older. But no, again, I'm very fortunate, as most guys in this sector are, guys and girls, that it's varied, it's interesting. So, you know, I've got further meetings later today. We've got this podcast, whatever a podcast is. I'm not with it on this kind of modern stuff, but if this is a podcast, then I'm on it. Well, that's great. Um, First thing this morning, we had an operational review. But my main job here is to make sure that as for our baseline materials, as I mentioned, certainly the refuse derived fuels, the plastics, the cardboard, those other commodities, that we've got enough or sufficient markets to place all those materials in, and that we're doing our best to leverage our relatively strong position in terms of volume to achieve decent commercial rates, to enable us to be competitive in the competitive world that we're in down here in London. And again, everybody up and down the country would say they're in a competitive market, which of course they are. And that's one of the reasons that we have to fight hard on our commercials to make sure that we can stay relevant to our customer base. So as we've grown quite quickly over recent years, we've made one or two acquisitions. So it's not a standstill set of volumes. We're growing and growing and growing, and we can't let material back up on us and then think, oh, we need to do something about this. So we have to kind of forward plan that and make sure that we're set up, certainly in a kind of rolling 5-year period. So that's the main job, as well as some other good stuff as well that we get up to.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds like it keeps you busy as well as everything else. So what about have you got any facts you want to share? We always like to have facts, numbers, or something weird and wonderful things from your business that people might not know about. Have you ever
Oh,
found
crikey,
something
that is a
weird?
tricky one. Have I ever found anything weird?
Or is it
Do you know what? I haven't got any interesting stats for you. I mean, we do sometimes see some incredible things that come in as waste, from something as mundane as pallets of sawn oak beams, which they must be worth 100 quid each, that are just not used on site. So we see, and you think, wow, how's that come in here as waste? To kind of glass and metal furniture that we'll see from, I won't mention the client's name because they're doing a job to clear this material. We almost like architecturally designer, lovely material that comes in that we've got to try and place for reuse. We had one incident a few years ago where we had a wood bin that went through a shredder in the yard, and a bag of banknotes went poof into the air through the shredder. They'd found their way into a skip.
oh no.
And I'm not answering any further questions on that one, by the way.
I was going to say, did
So
they
that
get
was a bit of an
shredded?
unusual.
Yeah.
So yeah, nothing too alarming. But the serious point is, I think people would be surprised the amount that we do actually recycle. And when we have guests into our head office here and our main plant, as we do pretty much every day, they are surprised at the level of kit, tens of of pounds worth of plant and machinery that go into delivering the outcomes that I've just mentioned. Recycle everything you can, RDF at the back end, and then, a zero to landfill proposition for non-hazardous waste, of course. They are surprised at what goes into it and what's back of house. And then the other part of it, I suppose, well, maybe a nice fact and a nice number. We've always, I mentioned the sports thing. Sports always been huge here, and our owner, Mick Crossan, has always supported sports. And up to a few years ago, that was kind of informal support. And what I mean by that is no real measurement. It's yeah, we'll do that, we'll do that, we'll do that. Then, of course, the social value calculations actually start to become important. And this is the power of good procurement, isn't it? When customers are looking at this kind of stuff and actually assessing it. So I think our 2024-5 provisional number of social value, I think it's gone up from 12.6 million the previous year to 13.7. Forgive me if I'm a point out or two, but about 13.7 million of social value. So that's a pretty big number for a small business in terms of the money that we generate. And because we're London centric, the vast majority of that money goes into the areas that we actually work in. So when we're talking to our clients about, our carbon credentials, our social value, that social value we create is actually in the areas that they are working. And that's quite a surprising one for people that might not know those other sort of projects that we get up to.
Sounds good, Simon. Sounds good. So we always ask all our guests for a bit of their favourite slang or dialect. I'm thinking there might be some London dialect here that I'll be totally unaware of.
I'm not really into the slang, but I tell you, I'm not going to say something I like on the slang, but I'm going to tell you something I absolutely hate.
All right, okay.
Yeah, and that is the trade slang calling a materials recycling facility a MRF. I despise it, and it gets worse because quite often people will call our plant a dirty MRF. Now, you imagine the connotations to the wider world of saying, what the difference between we run a £50 million materials recycling facility or we run a dirty MRF. The two things are entirely different. So I've always sort of railed against that one. When you mentioned about phrases, there's a phrase that a long time ago, before I was in this industry, a guy used one day, and I thought it was hilarious, and I use it quite often, and that is, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And I sometimes quite like that one. It kind of hits the spot sometimes in the right circumstances. So that's one that comes out of the locker from time to time. But yeah, if I could change one thing on the slang, please don't refer to these great plants that people are operating around the country as MRFs. They're a material recycling facility. They're a recycling plant. They are not a MRF.
Good point. Good point. We're going to give you a magic wand to resolve one thing in the waste management sector. What would you like to use it for? Apart from changing the word MRF to recycling.
Yeah. I guess. Well, there's two things. There's one that's sort of a language and word thing, and there's a physical thing.
Okay.
The language thing is if we could have some consistent engagement, dialogue, and policy from government. I think there's a lot far cleverer people than I in this sector that would be calling for that. It strikes me that everything and everyone involved in this sector from a government point of view is very much a revolving door, and we can sometimes go to square one, and I think we've got some absolutely enormous challenges and difficult waters to navigate over these next few years as we lead into the ETS implementation that's planned for 2028. Well, that may or may not happen in 2028, but we all know there's so many challenges in this, so many complexities. It really is going to take an enormous effort and collaboration to get that anything like correct to land as closer to a civilized and even-handed approach. That is an enormous challenge. The other one on the words front would be, again, people dealing with facts and accuracies other than perception. But I suppose the other one, more physical and closer to home, both in my case at home and in and around London, is the fly tipping problem. It's absolutely enormous. It seems to be getting worse. I wouldn't mind betting again with the recent lift in landfill tax and the resulting lift in a lot of pricing of commercial operators, yards, tipping spaces, that will drive further value in doing that and therefore increase the volumes. And those volumes are already high. Quite often they'll fall either to a private landowner, um, and quite often to back into the public purse. We deal with some local authorities on clear ups. It's actually quite a big part of our business. We do, all sorts of clear ups from, a couple of bags to whole warehouse clearances that have been broken into, tipped really quickly, and then just left. But that really is a scourge. And closer to home, just last night, I was driving up a lane I've driven up a million times in the past. And at one particular bend, there was a mattress chucked out and against the hedge. And I
Yeah.
thought, coming onto the podcast today, there's an indicator that is a piece of waste in a place that I've never seen waste chucked before. So if that's not a bellwether to a problem that's out there and getting worse, I don't know what is.
Yeah, good point. And final question. What advice would you like to give the younger generation coming in and seeing you and thinking, I want to be where Simon is? I think you've kind of said there's lots of opportunities, but just one short, sharp piece of advice. What would you say?
Oh, crikey. I would say, unlike your suggestion earlier that kind of people of my generation fell into it, why not discover it and research it and consider it as a career? It is without a doubt a blossoming industry. The range of tasks that you're involved in keeps it incredibly interesting. Probably counterintuitively to a lot of youngsters, it's actually a relatively well rewarded sector as well. Um, so for those boys and girls coming into it, you can carve a good and successful career in it. So I would say, look at it, investigate it. What we do see is there's far, far more educated, graduates coming into it, and actually a little bit of that passion sitting behind the education as well. And that's changed a lot of things. So my advice would be definitely consider it as a sector, investigate it, maybe even gear your education towards it, and then get involved. It's a fulfilling career. There's no doubt about it.
Perfect. I
I think
don't think
that's
anybody, yeah,
perfect advice to end on, Simon.
absolutely. Thank you very much for your
Absolutely perfect.
time. It's very interesting.
It's good to talk to you. Thanks for inviting us on. Thanks for thinking of us.
And that's you done your first podcast, Simon. You can tell all your pals.
Yeah, yeah. When I heard a podcast, I thought it might be something to do with gardening. It was something to do with what worms make. But now I've discovered it's a piece of film and me talking. So
Yeah,
yeah, there we go.
absolutely. So thank you
Yeah,
very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you.